Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Community IT webinar about using a skills matrix at your nonprofit. So my name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I will be the moderator today.
I'm Heather Ritchie, and I'm a consultant at Build. I've enjoyed working with nonprofits for over 20 years and have served in a variety of roles from communications to technology to executive director. I've led change management efforts in a variety of sectors and served as an educator, professional development specialist, and leadership coach.
How do you set the stage to help staff feel psychological safety around discussing staff members' strengths and challenges? And I feel like that's a perfect segue into our next slide.
It is.
So take it away.
I'll take that. I would say to respond to the question first, setting the stage and really having open discussions with people about what this is going to be used for and why you all are investing the time in it is how to help create that safe space. If an organization is going to ask everybody to fill this in and then just share out the results and not have discussions on it, I would say that's not creating the safe space that this type of tool needs. What this needs is honest conversation before you even start it, that, hey, we are going to be looking at our team and seeing how we can build it and how we can grow one another. And if it comes from this growth and this strength of opportunity, then people are more likely to lean in and say, you know what? PowerPoint's not my jam, but I know I need to do it for a couple things. And so I need to level up at least to the next level. Versus I love AI and I want to know everything I possibly can about AI, but it's a new technology. So I'm a novice at it, just like a number of other people. And so I think giving examples for whether it's the leadership or the team that is doing it together, kind of all acknowledging, maybe they start the conversation with, what's one thing you're really great at? And then the next one is, what out of these is the thing that you're least experienced at? To make it a group experience. I do think it's more helpful for individuals to reflect on themselves first. So even if you are sharing this out as a group, in a group setting, you might want to give people the spreadsheet in advance or a quiz or the survey or however you decide to do it. I do think people like to learn about themselves and to reflect on themselves. And it's something that the more we can give space to, I think the more used to it people will also become accustomed. So I think that's the other piece about making this a safe space. If this is done once every 5 years, it's probably going to be a little awkward. If somebody does it once every quarter, and reviews it with people, then it becomes more routine and less anxiety producing.
I was going to jump in and say also in the context of what we're talking about, that you might do this exercise early on in a change management situation when you're assessing where are the weaknesses of your organization and what would you like to be doing differently 2-3 years from now. That like you're going through this assessment. Do you need a new CRM? Do you need a new fundraising tool? Do you need a new, Teams collaboration tool? How are you doing these different activities? And as a group activity, like really assessing where you want your organization to be. And that's a very different context from if you've gone through a software selection, somebody in leadership has already chosen, we're going to have this new tool. And then as part of that, you're doing, a survey. Do you think you'll be good at using this tool? Like that's not going to make people feel good about being on the this team that's trying to get those skills that they need for a specific tool. So that's something else to think about, is when are you using this in the process?
Mhm. Very true.
And someone mentioned in the chat, I'll just say, if you lead by example and disclose your weaknesses as a leader, whether it's around some of those competencies or if it's around specific tools and tasks and skills, that also sets the tone.
I 100% agree, and I love that. I also want to just note that I often will be like, oh, what am I not good at, or what can't I do? The language with which we approach this also really helps people. If I hear like, what can I grow into, or what can I be stronger at, I'm more likely as a human to respond like, "Ooh, sign me up," versus if it's kind of framing it as me not succeeding. So I think the language matters in a lot of the work that we do when we do self-reflection.
The other thing I love about having it in this spreadsheet is that it gives you a perfect opportunity to, when you talk about it again another quarter, half a year later, people can change, right? They took that tutorial, they did some extra work, and they, put the work into PowerPoint because they knew they were going to be using it. So you give people also an opportunity to see themselves mastering something, which I just love as well. But in the interest of time, I want to make sure we talk about the stakeholders and rolling it out so we can get to our next piece, which is the examples.
Sure. So I would say there is a decision point when you talk about the stakeholders that a lot of departments or organizations kind of have to initially wrestle with. And that is this inclusive of full-time staff only? Is it inclusive of part-time, volunteers, consultants? So you want to think through who's being invited into this conversation, who needs to be invited, who needs to understand that this has to be a smaller group because we're really looking at this project versus the whole department. And so thinking through the people part of this is also thinking through who's invited to be a part of the process. And as we talked about in reviewing the matrix, people can be a part of the creation of the timeline. I saw somebody ask earlier, like, how do you get started? The starting point might just be setting up a brainstorming session and saying like, hey, what do we do in this department? What do we do well? What are people always asking us about? Like, have we noticed more questions about the CRM this quarter than the last quarter? I wonder why that is. Or we've seen a lot of interest in AI. Should we start putting that on our radar? So part of that could be brainstorming session. Part of that could be a leader coming with draft of a matrix and saying like, what do you think? Is this how we start looking at our department, and what skills can we grow into? One thing that I did want to note is whatever you build for an individual template, you also want to have consistent for everybody in the group that you're looking at. So for instance, I might say, well, there's 5 competencies, but I have a 6th one that I'm really, really good at. That's awesome. We want to note that. But unless you want to look at everybody with that competency, that kind of should be a bonus note about that person on the side. And the reason for that is you want to see what your team is doing for your core skills and competencies. And so to roll this out, the other piece to the person's question earlier is really helping people understand the purpose and how it can benefit them. Make sure you talk to the individuals about the scores and how they feel about sharing those with their peers in advance. And that's why you may have to step into things being anonymous. And then ask people about how they feel about sharing their growth and strength areas to determine as a team, like how best do we talk about this with that goal of looking at the strength of the team. And then this idea of mastery and being supported to get better at stuff, it's really, if people feel you are genuinely interested in supporting them, and to the person's question earlier, like genuinely interested in making time to develop your skills, people usually respond very positive to that. And I want to make a note on that. when we are saying like invest in these people and do professional development or help one another do training, that doesn't mean necessarily that they create an hour webinar or they're paired up as your mentor or that you're going to pay for a very expensive certification. There are a number of ways to develop our skills, and micro learning is really kind of the heart at what can happen right now, I'd say, in the landscape that we're in with technology changing as fast as we can. And when I talk about micro learning, I'm like, read a summary of a book or watch a podcast, listen to a podcast, watch a 1 minute video, and then have a discussion at your next team or department meeting saying, hey, guess what I learned about X? It does not have to be the investment in a 9-hour course that you may not have time for in the next 3 quarters.
No, we did a webinar just a couple months ago on being a learning organization, and that was one of the suggestions, was to make time in your all staff meetings or your team meetings, just set 10, 15 minutes aside for learning sharing. Like, what have you gotten better at? And just share some examples. I mean, people can do, well, we used to be able to do brown bags like actually in person, but you can do those over Zoom as well. And I do wonder too if that is a point where you have your plan, you have your skills matrix, and you might at that point want to talk with HR and your employees and their supervisors around making it a goal that then they do get a reward for in terms of their professional development as that goes. So can you give us some examples and uses?
Sure. So we talked about kind of before this session 4 examples and uses that we've experienced over time for using skills matrices. And so one of them might be new technology and training. So as Carolyn noted, if I by chance have a new CRM coming in or my website moves to Drupal, and it doesn't move automatically, our department has moved it there, right? Who has the time to learn it? Who's going to be the one that really dives deep initially, or is that spread across the department? Those are the kinds of conversations that can happen with the skills matrix. If an organization decides to move from Google to Teams or Teams to Google, what parts can you divide into discrete learning activities that people can do? Or, as I noted before, you may have heard of AI, and some people are curious about it. I've noted with some of my colleagues that some people are like, I want to know as much as I possibly can tomorrow about this. And I know others are like, please don't make me learn anything about AI except what I absolutely have to learn. And those are the kind of conversations that you can dig into and understand, and then help level up the team to the level it needs to as a baseline, and then let other people dive deep. And then also staffing changes happen. We've seen them happen more often, especially since COVID. A staff member leaves an organization. What skills did that team member really bring to our department? And is there somebody else on the team that actually has some of those skills that wants to lean into those? Or do we need to hire a completely new person to replace that person? Again, if you've invested in this and you continuously invest, you would have that answer along the way, or it might be the starting point for why you want to start up a skills matrix. And then building project teams, another great opportunity to just see who's great. I have a colleague that I know that if I need her something for attention to detail, I send it to her immediately. And so on your project team, who's your attention to detail person? Who's your big picture thinker? Who's the project manager type's personality? And if you look at the team and you're like, oh, we're missing something we really need, that's where you can have that conversation. And then last but not least, collaboration and knowledge sharing. I'm a big proponent of it. I'm a lifelong learner, a professional development specialist for years. And this idea of what's in the room is probably more knowledge than anyone knows. And so how do we surface what our colleagues know and also create systems, to Carolyn's point, that everybody doesn't bombard uh, Heather with every question about AI, but but we also know who we can go to within our teams for advice or expertise.
That's great. We have a question in the chat. Norma says, we already have a matrix of cliff strengths.
Mhm.
And this seems like it might be a more tactical, specific skills tool. So, do you have experiences with organizations that already have a matrix of some sort and how this can complement?
Yes, we actually also use Clifton Strengths at Build, so I love it. It is one of those tools where you take a quiz and basically are shown kind of where your innate skills kind of put you out of a list of a number of skills. And I would say you could use Clifton Strengths. Those, again, are more in your competencies space than they are in how well have you explored or learned Excel or the CRM that you're using or the website system that you're using. So I would say that a skills matrix of this sort would complement your Clifton Strengths. And you could utilize the Clifton Strengths more in the competency space. And then your skills would be more for your everyday, what the organization needs from your IT department or for their own IT skills.
Right. No, I like that. Yeah, and I could see how they do different things. So you may still need to have two matrices, or you may want to be able to put them together. So we have some other questions, a couple of questions from registration. So one thing is, how can you encourage people to volunteer skills and time when they are already so busy with other tasks? And I feel like we could also take that a step back. As you have said, this exercise itself is going to take time, that you need to have meeting time. People are going to have time to reflect and assess this. So being able to prioritize that time. Do you have advice on that?
We all want more time. I think this is something, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. I would say I saw a note in the chat that someone said, hey, we could use this at our next team building retreat. That's exactly where you could start. The idea of like, how do you help people volunteer their skills and their time? Part of that, I think, is an organizational culture. There are some organizations that I've seen that they acknowledge that a part of your time is to build your skills as well as support your colleagues to build their skills. I also know I've worked in nonprofits forever and that I always have more on my list than I could ever get to. So I don't want to be pie in the sky. But I will say it comes to prioritizing it. And if you want to have effective teams, if you want to have collaborative workspaces, then we have to invest in the people and these conversations. They won't just organically happen and your team, poof, is this highly effective functioning team that is doing everything everybody possibly wanted. It really takes the people side of this. And that's where kind of we noted at the beginning with the build, it's like there's so much technology coming at us and it's changing. And I watch organizations, for instance, one nonprofit has 5 project management tools. And so, it could also spark conversations about, hey, I'm great at these tools, but did you notice that we're using 5 of them? And so we have to support technologically 5 different tools and learning curves. So some of this may be what I'm getting to is that you may learn from these conversations that there are things that you could streamline and then prioritize the people side versus always having to respond to every technology need.
And I think this is an investment. You've said it several times, investing in your people and investing in your organization. And that's going to take a leadership role that prioritizes investment at all, because it's not, you don't have immediate results. You don't have immediate outcomes. It's an investment for that reason. And I think I've heard this story from someone else at Build about going through a software selection for, a wide-ranging a platform or, a CRM, something that was going to be used by everyone at the nonprofit, and they were very unhappy with the tool that they had. And, for kicks, I guess, they included that tool in the software selection. And in fact, it did everything that team needed. But because of the training on it, they didn't know that it even had some of the capabilities that they were looking for. And at that point, they were so soured on it that they had to take it out of the running. They just needed to get something new. So also, as a leadership realization, when you invest in your team and their ability to use the tools that you have, you're going to save money and, I guess, tears maybe on some of those technology tools.
Agreed.
We have another question, which I feel like we haven't talked really about some of the downsides of this sort of a exercise, but one person in registration asked, how can you motivate people to try harder and do basic things themselves? And I could see, you talked a lot about using this skills matrix and building this spreadsheet as a team exercise and as an empowering exercise, but have you run into situations where it didn't work out so well?
Sure. I'm trying to think about the motivation level. I think what it sparks in me is that this tool is going to be successful with the right approach and the right culture. And if an individual is currently demotivated in their work, I think the wonder would be by looking at the skills that the department needs or for the project, is the person able to really showcase their strengths? And if not, then what does that mean for the organization and the individual? Is it that they need a better fit for themselves for a position? So I guess to answer that, it's partially also this tool in that way could look at, if I'm looking at all the skills the department needs and I am not motivated by any of them to grow my skill set, that's a reflection that I think would be very internal for that person. If I'm looking at all the skills that are on the list and I'm like, oh, there's a few that I really would like to grow into, but I'm not in that role, then that provides a conversation space for the team. And so I think that it could be both an internal motivator and a team support. It is also about the health of the team going into this. The stronger your team is on communication and openness and culture, the faster this can build that strength for your individuals and your team.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry that we're getting close to the end of the hour because I feel like we could keep talking about this for a while. We got some other really great questions coming in, so I'll make sure to put those in the transcript and we'll get some answers to those. But I want to quickly go over our learning objectives for today, which I feel like you just hit all of them, Heather. Understanding what a skills matrix is, understand the steps to create the skills matrix with your staff, explore the benefits and challenges, and learn tactics and strategies to roll them out to all staff. And we got some great examples from you. I want to make sure to let you know about our next month's webinar, which is going to be a great one. We are re-releasing our nonprofit cybersecurity playbook. With Matt Eshelman, who is our Chief Technology Officer and who wrote the first one, it's only 3 years old, 3.5 years old now, but so much has changed about cybersecurity, particularly with the rise of AI and some of the new hacks and security features. So we are reworking that cybersecurity playbook, and we will be releasing it That is at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific on Wednesday, October 23rd. So please join us again next month for that. And I just want to thank everyone for the gift of your time this afternoon. Really appreciate you spending your time with us and learning about this tool. I hope you can go forth and use it in wonderful ways to build your teams, help your nonprofits reach your missions. And Heather, I really want to thank you for your time preparing for this. And I feel so much smarter. So thank you so much, Heather.
It was great to do this today. And thank you all for everybody for your comments and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.